Greetings and welcome to another lecture on Chapter 10. Here we're going to be covering a couple of more personality disorders, starting with one of the really big ones, Antisocial Personality Disorder. It's sometimes abbreviated ASPD. I generally just say antisocial. Now what's going on here is you have someone who just is antisocial. I mean, it's named exactly what it is. They disregard and violate the rights of others. They really don't care about other people at all. And again, in some ways, this can kind of overlap perhaps into some of the other personality disorders. Remember, the watchword for personality disorders is vague. But what is going on here is they don't care about safety. Certainly they don't care about the safety of others, and often they don't care about the safety of themselves. Also, in order to be diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, they have to have shown signs of conduct disorder before the age of 15. Now, we're going to talk about conduct disorder a little bit later when we talk about disorders in children, but trust me, conduct disorder looks an awful lot like antisocial personality disorder. Now, a lot of times, at least in the past, I don't know if this is a recent change or not, but antisocial personality disorder used to be considered to be more or less synonymous with someone being a psychopath. And in fact, it's now been divided. Antisocial personality disorders is more about actual behaviors. We look and see what people do. Do they behave in antisocial ways? Psychopaths, which we'll be talking about later in this chapter, psychopathy, is more about someone's personality characteristics. So for antisocial, we're looking at behavior. And what does the behavior do? It disregards and violates the rights of other people. Now, because a person must show signs of conduct disorder before 15, this one cannot be diagnosed until after the age of 15. So basically, if someone is showing these before the age of 15, we say they have conduct disorder. After the age of 15, we say they have antisocial personality disorder. Causal factors, well, this one does seem to be inherited, in that it does tend to run in families even if the children are raised by someone other than their antisocial parent. But we're not entirely sure what it is that is inherited. I mean, we don't know what's going on. There are some things that have some inherited components. Impulsiveness, low anxiousness, aggression, that sort of thing are inherited. But we don't know what it is that basically takes somebody that simply may have inherited some bad traits and turns them into somebody with antisocial personality disorder. We do know that there is a correlation between antisocial as well as environment, particularly environment while growing up. So when you see poverty, when you see parents not supervising the kids, living in an inner city, which probably goes along perhaps with parental supervision a lot of times, inner city being sort of synonymous with poor, and therefore maybe parents have to work a lot, that sort of thing. Having a young mother, which is also correlated with poverty. Single parent family, also correlated with poverty. Conflict between parents, having a delinquent sibling. Maybe it's that the sibling goes along with the delinquent sibling and therefore becomes more antisocial. We're not sure. These are correlations, remember, not causations. Almost certainly there's a diathesis stress here going on, that there is a vulnerability. Perhaps the vulnerability is biological or genetic. And then the stress comes along. The stress may be the environment. It's possible that the diathesis, the cause, may also be created by this environment, but it would seem to be a little more likely, since we know some of these negative qualities are inherited, that just a person inherits the qualities and then essentially their environment makes them sort of super qualities. I do want to point out here, since I mentioned before when we were talking about histrionic, that antisocial personality disorder appears to be mostly a male phenomenon. This is not to say you cannot have females with it. It simply tends to be diagnosed in perhaps seen, but certainly diagnosed a lot more in males than females. There do seem to be warning signs, whether these are warning signs that can be more or less headed off at the pass or not. Okay, nature, nurture, Obsessive. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. Going back to heading off at the pass. Children with oppositional defiant disorder, which again is something we're going to be learning about in a later chapter. Sorry, we'll be learning about it in a later chapter. By age 6, oppositional defiant disorder in a lot of ways is simply refusing to submit to authority. And early onset cognitive disorder by age 9, most likely to develop antisocial personality disorder. So like we said, whether these are, it's a transitional sort of thing, whether treatment can prevent this, whether it's simply a biological thing that is coming out, we simply do not know. We don't know. One last link to point out that we do know, although it is a correlation, is that attention deficit disorder is also linked to antisocial personality disorder, especially when it occurs with cognitive disorder. So if you have, remember, ADHD, which again we're going to be learning about in that later chapter, one of the signs of that is impulsiveness and sort of an inability to not control your behavior, but sort of rein in some of the impulses that most of us can rein in fairly easily. So it's possible that the impulsiveness or that is part of it, or if someone has ADHD and conduct disorder, they are much more likely then to be diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder later on. No guarantees, it's a correlation, but it's there. So, the next disorder that I'm going to talk about is obsessive-compulsive personality disorder. This in some ways is, from its name, you could tell that it looks like obsessive-compulsive disorder. Do realize that it is a different thing. It looks similar, but it's a little different. Somebody with obsessive-compulsive personality disorder is a perfectionist to the extreme. They are complete and total perfectionist. Everything has to be done their way. Everything has to be done perfectly. Anal retentive to the extreme. To the cubed. It's just out of control anal retentiveness, where everything has to be their way, everything has to be perfect, everything has to be exactly right, very often for little tiny things, little things that don't matter, but everything has to be exactly the way that they need it to be. What separates this from true obsessive-compulsive disorder is there's no true obsessions. There's none of the obsessions about dirt, about safety, about what we normally see in obsessive-compulsive disorder. There are no true compulsions. There are no rituals. There is no having to wash your hands 20 times kind of things, or having to check that you locked the front door 10 times. What there simply is this general need for everything to be perfect, everything to be precise, everything to be the way that it is. They don't even have the obsession that, terrible things will happen if it's not. So you can see that on the surface, it kind of looks like OCD, but it's not. It's OCPD. Now, when we look at what it's comorbid with, it's morbid with what I like to call the usual suspects, which I suspect you could guess right now. It's comorbid with anxiety disorders, it's comorbid with mood disorders, and it's comorbid with other personality disorders. Yeah, we're kind of singing the same tune here. And so it's basically, like I said, there's no true obsession, no compulsive. So it's not OCD, but it sure looks like it. Causal factors, this is another one that looks like it's at least moderately genetic. It looks like it at least in part is inherited from a parent, for instance. I guess that's who you would inherit it from. Also, remember we were talking about the 5-factor theory when we were talking about possibly how to deal or how to diagnose these particular personality disorders? As is probably not surprising once you think about it, obsessive-compulsive personality disorder is correlated very, very highly with conscientiousness. Conscientiousness, remember, is responsibleness. It's making sure that everything is perfect, that everything is done correctly, that everything is done, etc., etc. So, yeah, not a whole lot of a shocker in terms of what that is correlated with. And with that, I'm going to end this video. Move on to the next.